we still plan outreach. We hit the holidays here, and I think we paused a little bit, but we'll be reinvigorating our efforts to.
Hey Ed, just so that you're aware, somebody hit this meeting is being recorded. So there's something that's specific that's maybe confidential for the COSDA members. I'm saying this for all. Be thoughtful. I don't know who's recording it, but wanted to make sure you were aware that button just went off.
I did see it, and of course, this will truncate my update. Everyone have a great day. No, just kidding. I guess that's recorded too. The next, I want to talk about the National Milk Testing Strategy. USDA put out a press release on the 8th, announcing additional states that are enrolled in the National Milk Testing Strategy, and that that effort, we've been working closely with our departmental public affairs folks at the Office of Communications. This is their last week, so I anticipate that much of the communications work will fall back to APHIS moving forward. And so look forward to that. We'll see what that cadence looks like. Of course, we'll be continuing to collaborate with COSDA on that. I'm just looking through the list here. We've made an announcement, I believe today. We've announced $70 million in grants to projects in most, I think 49 states. This grant money comes from the Farm Bill. It's Plant Protection Act, Section 7721 money. It's $70 million to about 357 projects that have been approved through APHIS. And these projects will help bolster agricultural infrastructure, help with the country's defenses against plant pests and diseases, and things of that sort. I think that's all I've got for now. We've got the avian flu, high path avian influenza outbreak, and the screwworm outbreak. I think we're still heavily concerned with fruit fly incursions into California and somewhat in Texas, and so we're working on that, and we'll just be working through the transition here, and we'll see where things go in the coming weeks and months. So with that, I think that's it. Questions?
Ed, I have a question that's actually not related to an outbreak of any sort, but I did notice that today that the USDA Economic Research Service has changed their website, and I did not know if that affected APHIS as well. So we have a lot of broken links on our web pages, and we're resolving those now, but I just didn't know if that was something that also was undertaken by APHIS.
No, but here's what I can tell you. I'm not sure what ERS did, but I know that USDA changed the USDA website underwent a migration of some sort in the last month, or maybe 6 weeks, 5-6 weeks ago. And it potentially ERS is just following suit with designing their website to have the same look and feel. So I don't know if y'all noticed, but the USDA website, the homepage did undergo a pretty big look and feel change about a month or so ago. It does not impact APHIS. APHIS's website is already fantastic, and if anything, we'll make it more fantastic, and hopefully there's no impacts on our website relative to whatever's happening with the ERS. So
thank you. And then also I did want to add that we do record the quarterly all member calls. And if anyone would like to view a previous call, you can do so by going to the NASDA website, going to the COSDA page, the COSDA resource page, and you can actually access it there. If you need, there is a password. Lauren, if you could help us out and maybe put that in the chat, then everyone can get access to any type of past quarterly member calls.
Thank you, sir.
All right, let's move on.
All right, Siobhan, go right ahead.
All right. So I'm going to take us back to High Pass because Ed and Lindsay and I have been talking a lot in these last couple of weeks. So as folks might be aware, we've been tracking a bunch of different cases in cats. These range from domestic cats, indoor only, indoor outdoor, some feral cats, and also big cats in zoological sanctuaries that have died from H5N1. And traceback has been difficult. The thing that they all have in common is they've had exposure to raw products, whether that's they caught a wild bird or a duck and ate it in the case of some of the sanctuary animals, or they drank raw milk or raw pet food. So as I said, the traceback has been a little bit complex because records have not been terrific. The cases are in Colorado, California, Oregon, and Washington. And in the case of at least one of the California cases, we were dealing with a product that was only sold, it was manufactured and sold within the state. So did not go into interstate commerce, and that takes away our regulatory jurisdiction. But we've been working pretty closely with the states, and testing has been happening through both our VetLearn labs and NVSL. We're getting a lot of questions from the regulated industry about ways that they can test their products, their raw poultry or raw meat before they make it into pet food, to make sure that it doesn't have H5N1. And what we've been telling them is, you can't test your rate of safety with these because it's not necessarily uniformly distributed through the tissues or in, an entire shipment of tissues. And the other thing is that we can do PCR all day long and get a positive result, but to know whether virus is really active, you have to do egg inoculation, and the laboratory capacity on that is really severely limited. So you might have seen in mid-December, we did put out a CVM update with some consumer advice, particularly for cat owners, saying that, you want to be careful about where you get your materials from. Don't feed anything that came from an affected farm or has been recalled. Of course, that's a hard thing for consumers to know. So we're going to be changing that consumer advice probably later this week, and going to be pointing to CDC and AVMA, both of which recommend not feeding raw meat diets to companion animals. And we're going to echo and underscore those and say that people should really be considering the risk before feeding any raw pet food, especially during this time while High Path is in circulation. I know a lot of my subject matter experts are going to be going to the AFCO meeting in Little Rock next week, so expect this to be a big topic of conversation, and hopefully I'll have more to share with you in the days to come. And if we do have materials that I can share with you, I'll send those to Jen and she'll get them out to all of you. But in the interim, you can always hit me up for any questions, or if you've got anything going on in your state, I can get you connected to the right person. So thanks, everybody.
Great. Any questions? All right. And then in place of Justin, we have Dana for USDA Farm Production and Conservation.
Hi, everyone. I am Dana Rogie. I am with, as Jessica said, with FPAC. Our shop handles Farm Service Agency, Natural Resources Conservation Service, and Risk Management Agency. We just had a few upcoming deadlines that we wanted to remind folks about, and would appreciate your help getting the word out about them too. First is we have a deadline coming up January 30th for our emergency assistance for livestock, honeybees, and farm-raised fish program. That's kind of our catch-all disaster program that helps with feed losses, hauling feed, hauling livestock to grazing acres, a whole plethora of things. Also helps with honeybee hive losses, and farm-raised fish losses as well. One thing we did add to that program this year is losses of income when removing dairy cattle from commercial milking due to H5N1. So we thought that was important to remind you folks that January 30th is the deadline for the 2024 losses. Another disaster program deadline coming up is our livestock forage disaster program. This is the program that helps with grazing losses in counties experiencing drought or for wildfire on leased land, federally managed land. The deadline for 2024 losses, again, is January 30th on that program as well. And then also coming up at the end of this month is our deadline for the food safety certification for specialty crops program. That one is January 31st. That deadline is for 2024 expenses. This is for specialty crop operations to help with expenses related to obtaining or renewing food safety certification. And we've already started sign up for 2025 expenses with the beginning of this year. And finally, just this is late breaking news as of yesterday. Some of our key safety net programs that were authorized in the 2018 Farm Bill have been included with the most recent extension. That's our agriculture risk coverage and price loss coverage programs, ARC and PLC, as well as our dairy margin coverage program. We have announced sign up dates for those programs. For ARC and PLC, sign up will run January 31st through April 15th. And for the dairy margin coverage program, sign up will be January 29th through March 31st. And we put out an announcement about that yesterday. I'll drop my contact information in the chat. We look forward to continuing working with you and really appreciate all the help we can get in the states to promote these deadlines and the various programs that we have to offer. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Dana, hi, it's Mike Wallace in Virginia. I had a
Hi,
question
Michael.
about the disaster assistance programs. Is that only available for producers who are not located in a previously disaster designated locality?
So ELAP and LFP are not tied to disaster designations.
Okay, but
That
the foraging and the crop loss.
Livestock forage is based on the drought monitor. So I have a link that I can send or drop in the chat that will provide the list of all eligible counties for that program.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Okay, that's it for me. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Dana. All right, let's move on to any other updates from federal partners. Sorry, did we miss anybody who might have joined late?
I didn't have any others on my list.
Oh. All right.
Hey
Jim,
there.
I see you on, Jim. Do you have an update?
Yeah, just a light update. We just mailed out the Census of Horticultural Specialties to nurseries and greenhouses across the nation. We're asking people to please respond. That's a follow-on survey to the 2022 Census of Agriculture. And we are continuing to deliver our Census of Agriculture products coming soon, outlying areas, including Mariana Islands, Virgin Islands, American Samoa, and Guam. And that's all I have.
Perfect. Thank you. Any questions for Jim? All right. Why don't we move on to our new old business before we get into our presentation today? Any updates, anything anybody wants to share for the good of the order?
Yeah, can I share about the programming committee?
Sure. Yeah. Yes, let's do that.
Okay, cool. So we have a programming committee which is responsible for determining and developing content for professional development that'll be shared during our quarterly meetings, and then also we also submit those suggestions for any inclusion in our annual meeting. One of which our committee is responsible for getting our professional development program for today. But really quick before we move on to that, I wanted to just open up to the membership that if you are interested in being part of that committee, what that looks like is sending me an email saying that you're interested, and then we meet regularly-ish to discuss some next steps for the next meeting. So topic ideas, and then kind of how to execute those. So if you're interested in that, please let me know. I'll put my email in the chat, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Amber. Any questions for Amber? All right, so do we have any other new or old business we want to cover before we move on to Eric? All right, well, I think I'm going to turn it over then to Logan and Amber to introduce Eric Singer, who is going to do our presentation today, Cool, Calm Communicator. Very excited about this. So if you want to go ahead, Amber.
Yes, I am back. It's my pleasure to introduce Eric Singer. He is an emergency management crisis specialist and with the Argonne National Laboratory Risk and Crisis Communication Program. He is a popular instructor with Argonne's PAST, P-A-S-T, Public Affairs, Science and Technology Fusion Academy. He's part of a team that helps provide public affairs training, exercise support, product development, technical assistance for government, nonprofit, private sector, and international organizations. I met him. He was an instructor for me at a conference for radiological preparedness. So a radiological emergency preparedness. So I was very, we're all experts in our field, right? But I just was I learned so much more, and it was a very interesting time. And I really feel like we can learn a lot today. So I'm super excited. And without further ado, Eric, welcome and take it away.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Amber. And wow, I have a lot to live up to. So thank you so much. So right now, what we're doing is going to go ahead and put the PowerPoint up. Don Hanscom is my videographer and also video producer from Argonne National Laboratory, PAST, Public Affairs, Science and Technology Fusion Academy. Right now, we have your screen up, Don. But thank you again, all of you, for watching. We're going to be showing that in just a few moments. Don, can you hear me? Because right now we're looking at your full screen. So this is what happens. I was in television for many, many years. And what I learned was sometimes you have to dance. Sometimes you have to be able to ad lib and be able to deal with situations that are beyond your control, technical situations. And that's a smile. Thank you, Amber. A heart. So Don, tell me if you're all good to go. There we go. And once again, thank you so much for being here and tuning in. This is Cool, Calm Communicator for the communication officers of the State Departments of Agriculture. I'm your host, Eric Singer, our videographer and video producer, who will be running it. So when I say Don, you'll know who I'm talking about. Don Hanscom. Say hello, Don. Well, maybe he can't say hello. That's all right. You'll know in spirit that he said hello. Let's go ahead to our next screen. Let's go back. There we go. This is what you're going to be learning today. We're going to learn together training to help you deliver your message more effectively with the public and news media, and identifying best practices to communicate in one voice to multiple stakeholders. Bottom line, let's define stakeholders, internal and external. An internal stakeholder is the person you work with in your organization, the person down the hall, the person in your building. That's an internal stakeholder. And an external stakeholder is your mother, father, sister, brother, uncle, aunt, news media, and public. I would say in many cases, when it comes to communication and disseminating messages, I would say bottom line is make sure it's first to your internal stakeholders, because many times your internal stakeholder can be your biggest supporter, but also your biggest critic, especially when they're not tuned in to what you're about to say. And then a half a click away, go to your external stakeholders, your public and your news media. Next slide, Don. When it comes to conversations, I'm going to say an interview is a conversation. I think that's how you need to perceive it as well. You own the interview. You own the conversation. Ultimately, you set the tone. You control your messaging, plan, practice, and prepare it. And you help guide the outcome. When something works, guess what? You could pat yourself on the back and say, wow, that worked. I worked with my other public information officer or my subject matter expert, your SMEs, and everything worked a-okay. If it didn't work, well, guess what? You're also to blame. You help guide the outcome. And in this case, maybe you didn't do as good a job as you can. In future, you go back in time, do an after action report, and gauge accordingly what worked, what didn't work. Next slide. All right, let's talk about an on-camera example. I always like to have the most up-to-date videos in our PowerPoint presentations. Now, with all the videos that I'm going to be showing, I want to make sure that everyone is clear on this. This is not a political statement. This is just about presentation. This is just about interpretation of the presentation. That's it. No politics involved in this. This is the most recent from last week, California wildfires. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass. You remember her, she spent 17 and a half hours on a plane coming from Ghana for a presidential inauguration. In that 17 and a half hours, I'm going to guess that she knew what was going on. She had a feeling for what she should say, and hopefully she would say it. In this case, this took on a life of its own. This interview, a short interview, I just took a clip from it. It was about 6 to 10 minutes long, but I'm showing you what you shouldn't do. You should always have something to say to connect with your internal and your external stakeholders. With that said, let's listen to Mayor Karen Bass to talk more specifically about what worked, what didn't work. Don, go ahead and roll it. As you can see, that started the coverage. was everyone able to hear it? Even though she didn't say anything, we have subtitles, closed caption on there for 508 compliance, which means everyone can be able to see and hear it in their own way. Did everyone hear that, Amber? I just wanted to make sure on your end. Could you hear the interview?
No, I could not.
You could not. Okay, so then that's potentially a problem on our end with that. Bottom line is, as you could see with the closed caption, she wasn't answering anything. That started the coverage. And Don, while you're working on that to make sure that we can be able to hear it, Amber, what I'd like you to do is also, if you could, go ahead and pull up the PowerPoint as well so that we can make sure that if there is an issue with the next video, you'll be able to take over and play that video. Is that all right, Amber?
Yes, on it.
Great. Thank you so much. With that said, I like to do within these exercises, I like to have a lot of different people doing different things. Normally during training, that's what I do. We do interactions. And with that said, Jessica, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
All right. Now, before our presentation, what I did was I asked certain people to go ahead and be part of this exercise. In this case, this would be if we were just doing either remotely, like what we're doing right now, or an on-camera interview, or whatever social media platform, whatever platform that they would use for communication. With that said, go ahead and say your name, spell it, Jessica, and your official title.
Jessica Hackett, JESSICAHACKETT, and I am the Director of Communications for the Maryland Department of Agriculture.
Jessica, may I call you Jessica?
Sure. Yep.
All right. Jessica, with that said, thank you so much for doing that. And let me remind everyone the reason why I did it that way. Every good interviewer should ask that question because in many cases, sometimes what happens is they become MMJs. No, not medical marijuana, but multimedia journalists. In other words, they're a one-person band. They bring the camera, they bring the audio gear, they write the story, they do the interview. Obviously, you can't juggle everything. So make sure that you say your name, spell it, the name of your agency and your official title on camera. So that way there won't be a mistake. And that way, if there's a mispronunciation, it's not on your end, it's on their end because you went ahead and said your name. So Jessica, first, what was that aha moment in your life that you said, wow, I made the right decision to do what I'm doing right now?
Oh boy, that's a good question. Well, I've been a state employee now for over almost 20 years. And I think when I first started and I realized I could reach out to people and actually help and make a difference, that's when I felt like I was doing what I was supposed to do.
What did you have for breakfast today and why?
I had a sausage biscuit because I was running out the door and it took 55 seconds to heat up, and I could eat it in the car as I was driving my daughter to the bus stop.
What do you hope to take away from this webinar today?
I hope to be able to take away how I can communicate more clearly and under pressure and get my message across more clearly.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
It's cold here in Maryland, so I hope nobody else is freezing as much as we are, but I'm only saying that because it's cold in my office.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Jessica. All right. Next slide, please. So what do people want to know? Well, they want to know multiple things. Go ahead and hit it, Don. They want to know what happened, what does it mean to me, and what are you doing about it? And we break it down even more. What are the facts available? How does it affect me and my family and my community? And what are you doing about it? In other words, the future actions and next steps. Don, click again. And every message, every communication, anytime that you're talking with anyone, just like humans need air, so does messaging. Alert, inform, and reassure. Alert, inform, and reassure. Next slide, Don. We believe this is a way for communication success. This is the message map. And I believe Jessica and or Amber have sent that out to everyone. Just in case if they haven't, Amber, if you would you go ahead and just put it in the chat function so people could download it and be able to look at it? What this is what we believe is an easy way to organize your thoughts, the message map title, whatever it is, the key messages, what happened, what does it mean to me, and what are you doing about it? And then the talking points underneath. You could always abridge this for any reason. I would say, and I've said many times, that this is not just a professional message map. This is also a life message map. I've used this many times, even with my wife in a situation. So what happened if we have a given situation, let's say an accident, knock on wood. Let's hope there hasn't been an accident. But what happened? What does it mean to me and to us? And what am I going to do about it? And then I would have underneath the talking points. Don, next slide. Every successful communication, be it putting together your message map or just communicating with someone, not at someone, but with someone and to someone, plan, practice, and prepare. Plan, practice, and prepare. Next slide. Right now, we're going to be putting together a message map in just a few moments. With that message map, you'll hear the video and be able to learn a little bit more how to put one together. We're going to take a test to make sure that the audio is working. And if not, Amber will go ahead and take over the PowerPoint from her end and run it. So Amber, first, before we hit this, are you available to be able to go ahead and take over and just put the PowerPoint in that way, correct?
I think I got it, Eric.
You got it? Okay.
Yep.
Let's go ahead and that's Don's voice. So let's go ahead and take a shot. Let's go ahead and Don, hit the video. A message map is your information roadmap. It starts with a headline. I will use explosion at ABC facility. See the key messages 1, 2, and 3 underneath the headline? What happened? What does it mean to me? And what are you doing about it? Those would be hammered out by you and your communication team for a single person interview, a media briefing, or news conference with different tailor-made individual message maps for different SMEs, subject matter experts. Each would focus on key aspects of the situation based on their expertise. The SME would be able to stay on track to answer questions from the public, the news media, and your internal stakeholders. Key point 1. Let's use what happened. Talking point 1. Explosion at 9 a.m. Happened inside Building 5 during scheduled maintenance. Early indications, accident. Talking points 2. 3 people were hurt. Serious injuries, not life-threatening. Stabilized and transported to a nearby hospital. Families notified. Final talking points for key message 1. As a precaution, Building 5 was evacuated. Buildings 6 and 7 workers are sheltering in place during the investigation. Each key message would have specific information, so you can refer to it during a briefing or news conference. Remember, less is more when putting information in talking points. The reason is you could change information just before the news conference. Don't memorize it. When you are creating message maps, think about identifying stakeholders, internal and external. Think about what you would ask and what would concern you. This map helps you develop key messages, talking points, consistent messaging in one voice from you and your team. When you stick to your roadmap, you stay organized. You stay focused during a news conference, media briefing, or interview. Most importantly, you avoid communication regret. Once you say it, it's too late to take it back. All right, next slide, if you would. This is a good example of a message map in use. Obviously, this was done in the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse. That was in last year, March, in Baltimore, Maryland. Governor Wes Moore, on the right side of your screen, was in front of the news conference. Did you think he just winged it? No. He took time with his public information officers to put together what happened, what does it mean to me, and what are you doing about it? And you'll see how we did a healthy sprinkling of empathy as well. Don, go ahead and roll the video.
To the people of Baltimore and each and every one of the 6.3 million Marylanders who call our state home. I recognize that many of us are hurting right now. I recognize that many of us are scared right now. And so I want to be very clear about where everything stands. We are still investigating what happened, but we are quickly gathering details. The preliminary investigation points to an accident. We haven't seen any credible evidence of a terrorist attack. Our administration is working closely with leaders from all levels of government and society to respond to this crisis, and not but just by addressing the immediate aftermath, but also by building a state that is more resilient and a state that's more safe. That is our pledge, and that's our commitment, and we're going to keep that commitment. And lastly, to the victims of this tragedy and their loved ones, all of our hearts are broken. We feel your loss. We're thinking of you, and we will always be thinking of you. We pray for the construction workers who are on the Key Bridge, and we pray for everyone who has been touched by this tragedy and their families and all of their loved ones. But Maryland, we will get through this, because that is the Maryland spirit, and that's what Maryland is made of. We are Maryland tough, and we are Baltimore strong.
Next slide, Don. Did you notice this with his conversation? Go back if you go one more, if you would. No, we already went through that. One more. There you go. Stay there for a moment, okay? Did you notice the fact that it was volume, pitch, pace, tone, and silence? It was that pause. He was connecting. We'll be talking about empathy in a few moments, but it was that connection. That's what empathy is all about. Maya Angelou said it best. Words mean more than what is set down on paper. It takes the human voice to infuse them with deeper meaning. Doesn't mean you're acting, just means you're connecting. You're talking to someone, with someone. A different way of saying it, to really put it in perspective, is words mean more than what is set down on paper. It takes the human voice to infuse them with deeper meaning. See the difference? And I would say also with voice control, when you're doing something positive, you're talking about, say, for example, take your daughter or son to work day. You're doing a message map on that because you're talking to news people on that subject, or you're talking to the public. Either way, I would say when you're doing something positive, let's go back if you would for a moment, Don. I would say, thank you. Just stay on this for a moment, Don. Thanks. I would say smile. Here's why. Words mean more than what's set down on paper. It takes the human voice to infuse them with deeper meaning. When you smile, even on camera, or even when you're doing audio, in other words, just doing it as a recording, it comes through. In television, we learned that many years ago, that you can hear and feel the difference in the vocal quality. Volume, pitch, pace, tone, and silence. That pause. It's okay to pause. Next slide, if you would, Don. Before we click on the clicker for just a moment for the timer, I want everyone to close their eyes. I know this is going to sound a little crazy, but I want you to close your eyes for just a moment. I'm hoping that all of you have your message map. Amber, did you and your team send everyone the message map?
Yes,
Or
it was
Jeff?
in the email that Jessica sent yesterday. If
Perfect.
anyone doesn't have it, please let me know and I can get it to you.
Thank you so much. With that said, I want you to close your eyes for a moment. And what I want you to do is think of a personal or professional situation. that you would like to message map. I just want you to kick the tires, just check it out, see how it works for you. All right. Now, typically in classes, what I do is it'll be 20 minutes. In this case, I just want you to try it, see what it's like, see how it works. With that said, Don, click the timer. Now try it out. Hopefully no one's gone to sleep yet. As we're watching this, I just want you to get a feel for it, just to see if you would use this in your personal or professional life to be able to organize your thoughts and make them a little bit more easy to understand on the what happened, what does it mean to me, and what are you doing about it, just to see how it feels. All right, I might just go down to 2 minutes, and then what we'll do is we'll go to the next slide. I just want everyone just to kick the tires and see how it works for you. All right, go ahead and go to the next slide if you would, Don. Let's go to thoughts and feedback if you would. Let's go back a slide. Perfect. All right, I'm going to ask Jessica, did you have an opportunity to be able to use this, to take a look at it and test drive it for just a moment?
I did.
Thoughts?
I thought it was really helpful. We're currently dealing with a high path incident here in Maryland, so I was able to pull a little bit from that to help me organize my thoughts.
Perfect. And that's what it is, to organize your thoughts so that way you can be able to put it in a real easy syllogistic. In other words, from be able to go one on one and be able to get to the end. Instead of just once upon a time in the end, it's once upon a time. And if the end has to go here, it's okay, because you want to be able to put it together in the most organized way. Logan, what did you think?
I 100% echo what Jessica said. I think we all have these issues that we have in our brain all the time that are top of mind, whether it's high path to, different disease control, whatever it might be. But when you have to either write something down on paper or put something into a box, it definitely helps, spew those thoughts out.
All right. Thank you very much, Logan. Next slide, please, Don. When you're doing an interview, be it on any platform, doesn't matter if it's a remote on cam, that's what we're talking about right now. We're doing it this way, or just on camera, actually physically having a photographer slash MMJ multimedia journalist or a photographer and a reporter and you and or your subject matter expert. Remember to avoid jargon. Here's an example. If someone has to spend 30 seconds understanding what SME is and you have to Google it, you might be losing that person, especially when you're trying to make critical life-saving information available to them. Avoid jargon, and if you have to use it, SME, spell it out, subject matter expert, PIO, public information officer, PAO, public affairs officer, PAST, public affairs science and technology fusion academy. You catch the drift. Avoid the jargon, but remember, and sometimes people may forget, what happens is during an interview, especially if it's live, what happens is in the beginning, you might say subject matter expert. Now we have a whole new group of viewers who are watching, say, 10 minutes into it. Say it again. Explain what that acronym means, especially if you're going to use it periodically. When we're talking about using plain language, think about talking to someone like a 7th grader. Talk to your niece or nephew. How would you explain something really complicated in a very easy to understand way? Simple, easy to understand. And in some cases, have you noticed people do this a lot of times when they're talking? Because they're looking at notes. They're keep looking at notes and they're talking to you, but are they really talking to you? No, they're not. They're talking at you. So make eye contact. Look at them. Doesn't mean you stare at them longingly. You pause for a moment and you look at them again. You might look down for a moment. Volume, pitch, pace, tone, and silence. Next slide. When you're putting together your interview, inclusive of your message map, think of the basic tenets of journalism. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. Thank you, Amber. Longingly, laugh out loud. Yes, that was very funny. And I do check the chat. So if you have something to say, you're more than welcome to put it in the chat function or go ahead, say something. We're among friends, all of us. All right. So let's do it that way. This isn't a traditional classroom situation. I'm not a teacher. I'm just trying to help you get better at your craft. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. The basic tenets of journalism. Stay in your lane. Good example. When you're talking in a news conference situation, or even when an interview is being done just one-on-one, you and someone else, stay in your lane means, for example, my wife is a retired police detective and also part of ICAC, Internet Crimes Against Children. She was a lead investigator. With that said, she can talk about anything when it comes to police investigations. She can't talk about fire investigations. She can't talk about the Department of Agriculture. She can't talk about the avian flu. She can't talk about any of those things. She has to stay in her lane. And that's where she will be able to go to someone else and say to the reporter, let me get you someone who can be able to help you. I can't really answer that effectively, and I want to make sure you get the right information. And this is obvious, but sometimes people forget. Don't speculate. If you don't know, it's okay to say you don't know, and you'll get someone that information. But if you promise, you have to deliver. Next slide. And what to say when you can't say anything. You can always talk about plans, policies, protocols, and procedures. You can always talk about open source information that's available to the public. And that's something you'd have to talk with other public information officers in your venue, in your organization. What is readily available to the public? Plans, policies, protocols, and procedures. Next slide. I believe this person, Colonel Kedrick Wills, is among the best who has been able to explain plans, policies, protocols, and procedures. In November of 2022 is when he had this news conference. He was talking specifically about the murders of co-eds in Idaho. I have not seen or heard anyone do it better than he can, not about the investigation and about plans, policies, procedures, and protocols. Normally what happens is during news conferences, a lot of people, they want answers now from your organization, or in this case, from law enforcement. Well, it's not CSI. You can't make a decision right now about a murder. It doesn't take an hour, just like Law and Order does, to solve a case. With that said, I want you to hear plans, policies, procedures, and protocols. And this was done after a lot of questioning. Why can't you tell us what happened? Why can't you explain it? over and over again. And here's how he shut down those reporters with something very simple: plans, policies, procedures, and protocols. Don, roll the video.
We understand you want answers. We want answers too. But these take time. And if I could explain just a minute about the process here of what we go through just generally in investigations. So we use in advanced investigative techniques and crime scene processing. So what happens when a call comes in, the original officers, the first officers that respond to a scene. And then once that they've got their work there and determined that they need some additional investigative assistance, then they call investigators to come and help process that scene. And oftentimes it requires a forensics team to help process that scene. And when I say process the scene, what we're looking for is we're looking for any evidence that may help us to be able to find the people or person responsible for what we're seeing. And so we're collecting biological evidence, we're collecting latent evidence, whether it's shoe prints or tire marks or anything like that. We're trying to collect that evidence. We're trying to we do that through photographs. We do that through 3D mapping to be able to map the scene. We identify and we mark evidence, and then we collect that evidence. And then we look for any evidence that we think may be helpful. And once that is done, then we package all that evidence up and we send it off to forensics laboratories to be analyzed to see if it can help provide clues of what's happening. All of this takes an immense amount of time. The reason this is important to understand is because it's important that while this is such a tragic circumstance that we find ourselves in law enforcement, we believe we owe this to the surviving families to get this right. And so we're not willing to sacrifice speed for quality.
You notice the fact that he went ahead and shut down the reporters just because of the fact that he said, we owe this to the families. We're not willing to sacrifice quality for speed. That would be a soundbite that television would use, radio would use, and even newsprint would use. Bottom line is he shut down the reporters, plans, policies, protocols, and procedures. He also bridged. Bridging means you're going from one point to another. In other words, reporters keep asking you the same question over and over again, and you bring it back to the point that you want to make, not the point that they want you to talk about because you don't have enough information. We're still gathering the facts, but what we know is let's deal in facts, not speculation. You can read all the rest of them. I don't have to read them to you. But the bottom line is you're focused on where you want to go, not focused on where the reporters want to go. I want you to look at number 3, though. Do you see that one? I can't speak for other agencies, but we. I can't speak for other agencies, but we. Next slide. The reason why I wanted you to note that one is in 2001, I was part of an investigation. I played a peripheral role as an anchor reporter, and I interviewed 2 escaped inmates. Now, I used a variation of I can't speak for other agencies, and I used it in the way it was comfortable for me to use it as an anchor and talking about our television station. Many times people say, wait a second, how can you talk to other PIOs, public information officers, or public affairs officers about interviews? You only take it from the television, radio, or even newspaper side. Well, I can because I've probably done more interviews than most people. I've done hundreds just even on this situation where people were asking me as a subject matter expert my thoughts on what we did. So with that said, in addition to becoming an emergency management communication specialist for the last 10 years, I was in television for more than 30 and radio and social media. So with that said, I want to show you bridging. Remember, I can't speak for other agencies, but we. Here's how I did it to bring it back to what I wanted to focus on. Go ahead, Don, roll it.
The police ask you to interview these 2 guys to surrender 10 minutes of airtime. Is there any way you could have said no? Would any TV station have said no?
Well, I can't speak for any TV station. I can speak for 11 News and myself. And what we decided, this wasn't just a decision we just entered upon lightly. Basically, what happened was when they called, they said first that they wanted me to be part of the negotiations. Our news director, myself, Dave Beach, Dave Downey, and several others here in the newsroom, we discussed it for a few moments. And the first thing we said was, one, we own this story from start to finish. We want to continue, as a good journalist would do, want to talk to the people involved. Secondly, we also felt at that moment that there were lives at stake. Isn't that the duty of a journalist, to help others? And isn't this the ultimate responsibility, to save a life? Next slide, Dot. And the reason why I showed you that is because you can always bring the point that you want to focus on always back to bridging. And I did it that way as well. And I grimaced a little bit because I always notice a mistake that I made, but I've been up for 24 to 28 hours when I was doing all these interviews. This is about empathy and its importance in communications. You heard it with Governor Moore. You heard that prima facie. You heard him, connect with people, because people need to know you care before they care what you have to say. Take that in for a moment. When you're having a conversation with them about anything, be it at home or even at work, they need to know you care before they want to even listen to what you have to say. I believe that this video was very well done. It was from the United Kingdom, Dr. Paul Fury, who's a psychologist. He did a great job at explaining the difference between empathy and sympathy. Let's go to the next slide. The reason why is because there is a major difference between the two. Empathy connects. It connects all of us. Sympathy does in a certain way, but when you're giving critical life-saving information, you want to connect with them so that they're listening to you. So with that said, let's listen to Dr. Paul Fury from the United Kingdom talk about the differences in how empathy works. Don?
Stuff goes wrong for all of us, and at some point, it's our turn again to land in the pit of despair. But it's the conversations that we have whilst we're down there and how we respond to them that will determine just how fast we get back out again. Essentially, people will have one of two responses to us when they see us in pain: sympathy or empathy. Take one, the sympathetic response. The problem with sympathy is that it's based on the three things that worsen and prolong the bad situation that the person is in: pity, victim status, and agreement. When we sympathize, we add our own sorrow, fear, annoyance, our pity to the other person's feelings. And whilst they now feel less lonely, being joined by another person confirms that the pit is real and bad. When we treat people like victims, they behave like victims. And agreement just makes the walls of the pit all the more intimidating. Sympathy always ends in the same way, with a bungled rescue attempt, which almost always fails, because deep down, we don't want to be rescued. We want to be right. Okay, everyone, take two. Quiet on set, roll camera, and empathy. When we empathize with someone, we have the power to change the game. By reflecting back the feeling that we see the person having, we show them that they have been understood, deeply understood. By reflecting back their circumstances in plain words, we help them to step back and regain perspective. And importantly, the belief that they can repair their own situation for themselves. When all's said and done, sympathy can actually feel nice for a bit. But when it comes to getting to a solution, only empathy has the power to get someone up and running again. Okay. Take three.
Go ahead and go to the next screen if you would. Thank you. This is an example of empathy. Now, remember, we talked about this earlier. This is not about politics. This is only about substance. This is talking to your internal and external stakeholders. In this case, a couple of weeks ago, remember what happened in New Orleans, the tragedy, a guy driving a vehicle, driving into Bourbon Street and killing people. This was one of the first news conferences. This is Senator Kennedy at the podium. Once again, we're not talking about substance. We're not talking about what action with his internal and external stakeholders. Don, go ahead and roll it.
I wish I understood better why bad things happen to good people. If I make it to heaven, I'm going to ask. For those people who don't believe in objective evil, all you have to do is look at what happened in our city early this morning. If this doesn't trigger the gag reflex of every American, every fair-minded American, I'll be very surprised. I'm here because these are my people. I'm here because these are my people's friends. I'm here because there are a lot of Louisianians that are scared tonight. I don't want them to be. There's a lot of information going around. Some of it is actually true. Some of it isn't. The federal government is now in charge of this investigation. By that, I mean the White House, the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Department of Justice. I guess my final point is, I will promise you this. I will, when it is appropriate and this investigation is complete, you will find out what happened and who was responsible. Or I will raise fresh hell. And I will chase those in the federal government who are responsible for telling us what happened, like they stole Christmas.
Now, this is another example. Just last week, California Governor Newsom talking about the wildfires. Once again, we're not talking about politics. We're talking about empathy, the connection with his internal and external stakeholders. Go ahead and roll it if you would, Don.
By no stretch of the imagination are we out of the woods. You heard a chief say 10 p.m. tonight till 5 a.m. tomorrow will be peak winds. And having just quite literally an hour or so ago gone up the canyon and saw firsthand the impact of these swirling winds and the embers and the number of structures that are destroyed, not a few, many structures already destroyed, and the fact that people were still not evacuated, still did not heed the warning. We're just coming down the canyon, is a reminder of how serious this moment is and how important it is you listen to these evacuation orders. We've all been to memorials. I've never been to a memorial for a building, but for family members and loved ones. I know you cannot say this enough. It's foundational. One other thing I want to say, because you can't say it enough, is expression of gratitude. The President of the United States happens to be in town. It didn't take more than a text message to get the FMAG approved, which means we're getting reimbursed for the vast majority of these costs. No politics, no hand wringing, kissing of the feet. The President of the United States said, yes, what else do you need? Emergency proclamations being drafted as we speak. And I just want to thank the president because that's something I don't take for granted and something we should not take for granted at this moment in American history. So we're all in this together. None of us are asking for our respective political identities around here. Everybody's rowing in the same direction because everyone gives a damn. They're here for each other. And that's the spirit that defines the best of this state and this country.
Once again, totally different styles. But prior to these individual news conferences and any interview, plan, practice, and prepare. Successful communications just starts like that. And think about it when you watch a football game. Over and over and over again when you run a play. Bottom line is because it becomes muscle memory. In this case, plan, practice, and prepare with communications, it becomes gray matter memory. In other words, you remember how to say it, you remember how to do it. You can never practice enough. You can never help your subject matter experts become the best that they can be when they're on camera. Next slide. When we're talking about successful communications, we're also talking about what's behind you, what's around you. When you're doing a remote on-cam, I wanted you to see this. Many times, a lot of people use virtual backgrounds, and they're okay if they're done well. In this case, not very well. Look on the stage right side of this person. Do you see, you can see through his glasses? He must have had, he had some, go ahead and go back to that. He must have had some kind of building that he decided that he wanted as a virtual background. Virtual backgrounds don't always work unless you have great lighting. In television, we had chroma walls, you know, like that green screen. Weather people and news people would stand in front of that and have videos or stills so they could point to and be able to push. But our lighting was about $100,000 plus to make it look perfect so you don't see that like in between his eyeball. And it was even funnier when you look at it. I shot this off the television when I was in a training. It was right before 7 o'clock, and he's talking about the science of cannabis. Okay, we can all make some kind of joke about that one. Next slide. This was just recent, drones over New Jersey. I want you to look at over his, it would be stage left side. Do you see the woman talking in his ear? Because that's where he set himself up for the picture. If you or a subject matter expert is doing a remote on camera, sanitize what's behind you. Have it something simple. So something like this won't happen, because all I did was look at this and go, oh my goodness. My colleague and boss, Brett Hansard, sent this to me. He was watching CNN, took a quick picture. But this is something that it's with television interviews, with any interview, it's one and done. You've only got one chance of making it look good. Plan, practice, and prepare. Next slide. And this is my favorite. Once again, shot on my phone when I was getting prepared to do a training a couple of hours later. I was watching television and noticed this. All right, this is so strange on so many different levels. One, she has pink hair. I'm betting that she left her blinds open, because you can see over on the stage left side. Do you see that yellow that's on her wall? I'm thinking that's the sun peeking in. But to me, among the funnier things is that giraffe. If you're talking about critical life-saving information, would you have a smiling giraffe behind you? Probably not. You'd want to sanitize the room, have good lighting, have something that says something about your organization. Or if you're going to use a background, a virtual background, make sure it looks good for you so you don't glitch out. Also, where was she? Look behind her. There's two different doors that are open. Is that a bathroom? Is someone going to walk by her when she's talking? Think about these things for your subject matter expert and for yourself as a public information officer. Next slide. This is a good example. There's multiple examples in this of remote on-camera work. This was recent. This was in October of 2024, Hurricane Milton. These are the preparations. Actually, I lived through Hurricane Milton. It was on my birthday, and it was here in Florida. We had a lot of damage to our home, so I can definitely relate to what they're talking about. With that said, that's Deanne Criswell, FEMA administrator. As you can see, she's in her hotel room, but she sanitized the area. Obviously, she's working from that location. And the second one will be Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd. Both have very different styles. He is in Polk County, which is about an hour-ish northeast of my location in the Orlando area. I want you to listen to both styles, listen to the empathy, but also watch how this works for both of them with lighting. Go ahead and roll it, Don.
More now on the federal government's response to the storm. I'm joined by FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell. Administrator Criswell, thank you. First of all, where do FEMA's preparations for Hurricane Milton stand tonight?
Anderson, we have been preparing for Hurricane Milton for several days now. You know, we've got thousands of people in the state of Florida supporting the response and the recovery from Helene, but also from some previous storms. And this is the third year in a row that the west coast of Florida has gotten hit. But we've moved additional resources in. We've moved in search and rescue teams from our teams, from the Coast Guard, CBP, the Department of Defense. We've moved in commodities, healthcare assessment teams, all the same resources that we moved in ahead of Helene, so they can be ready to respond as soon as the storm has passed and as soon as they have needs.
How stretched is the federal response at this point? I mean, obviously there's a lot of folks in North Carolina in need and elsewhere still from Helene.
Anderson, we plan for multiple events just like this, but this is going to be a challenge, right? These are two very large events back to back, but we have a layered approach to our staffing, and we have done this before. We have responded to Hurricane Harvey, Irma, and Maria in 2017, and even in 2020, while we had every state declared for COVID-19, we also had major hurricanes and wildfires, and so we've done this before. We plan for this, and we have strategies to make sure that we're using all available resources within FEMA, but we're just part of the team, the rest of the federal government as well.
I know you talk about it quite a bit. We talk about people that have evacuated, that maybe the worst of us comes out. Some people come out and try to make the best of a bad situation. What's the message to those people, and what are you guys doing on hand in Polk County to make sure that doesn't happen, to make sure looters don't go into homes that have been evacuated?
Well, I've got a simple sign for them, and they can read this and figure it out, right? Fool around and find out. We're going to lock you up before quick. Don't even think about looting in Polk County, or you will go to the county jail. Our deputies are out en masse looking to arrest you. In fact, they'll enjoy it when they do.
Any parting words, any more thoughts before I let you go here on Live Now?
Be safe, and as soon as the hurricane's over, go out and help your friends in the neighborhood. Clear the roads. Don't call the office and ask for us to remove a simple tree. Get a chainsaw and get a friend. And remember, if you see power lines down, pretend that they're all alive. And that way, we'll all be alive. Be safe. God bless you.
As you saw just a few moments ago, two different styles of message mapping. What happens? What does it mean to me? And what are you doing about it? Totally distinct styles. But at the end, remember, he had a message. It's sort of an elevator speech of sorts. So with that said, sheriff of my hometown, yes, Kim, he's a pretty unique guy. Not very many people can be able to do what he does and have that hometown kind of attitude. But yes, I totally agree with you. His next career goal, being able to say FAFO on TV. Okay, fool around and find out. I think that'd be awesome. Good luck to you, Amber. I hope you can do that. This is an elevator speech. What I want you to do is think about, do you remember initially when we did our first interview? I did that with Jessica and I asked her, is there anything you'd like to add? There's always something to add. And the reason why is because you want to leave something for the viewer. In that case, you saw what Sheriff Judd said. You could also do it in a different way as well. You could have that message, or you could have a message to leave a great impression about you and your organization in a crisis situation or any situation. Here's an example of an elevator speech. And when I say elevator, it's like, is there anything you'd like to add? I'd go, yes, I'd like to talk about Argonne National Laboratory and where I work, PAST, Public Affairs Science and Technology Fusion Academy. What Argonne National Laboratory does is a think tank of ingenuity, a think tank to push the boundaries of humankind and make it better. Right now, Argonne National Laboratory is putting together something that's truly exciting, a bigger, better, bolder battery that can be able to suck in all the renewables, suck in all that energy, and be able to use it at a moment's notice. Argonne National Laboratory and the Department of Energy labs are coming together to come up with something to help humankind. Good example. Do you remember a couple of years ago in Texas Remember the situation where people couldn't turn on the lights? The lights, the toilets didn't work. Lots of infrastructure didn't work because our grid infrastructure for energy is one and done. When it comes in, unless you use it, it's done. A bigger, better, badder, more exciting, robust battery will make that a thing of the past. We'll always have energy. And that's what Argonne National Laboratory does. And that's why I'm excited to be part of it. But I'm also excited to be part of the past, Public Affairs, Science, Technology, Fusion Academy, because I go across the country to help public information officers, public affairs officers, and subject matter experts craft their most precious commodity, their message. Critical life-saving information to make it easier to understand so someone can easily access that information to save them and their families. That's my elevator speech. If someone said, is there anything you'd like to add? Now, I'm not putting anyone on the spot, okay, because this is something new, but I'm going to ask Amber. Amber, are you there?
If I say no, will you call in someone else?
If you say no, it is okay. Would you prefer to say no?
No, I'm good. I'm here.
Okay. All right. See, I'm not pushing her to do anything. All right. So Amber, if I would, and as a reporter, I should always ask, is there anything that you'd like to add? And if not, you as the subject matter expert or public information officer should always say, I have one more thing to say. Just like Sheriff Judd was asked, you would have something. So Amber, is there anything? And when I say it's an elevator speech, we're on the 10th floor. We're coming down to the first floor. So Amber, is there anything you'd like to add? And this would be something that you would come up with that it'd be for any, this would be something if you talk to the public, in other words, your external stakeholders, to talk a little bit about your organization and the positivity of that organization, even in crisis situations. So people have a better idea of what you and your organization does. So Amber, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, as we respond to this highly pathogenic avian influenza outbreak, I just want to be clear about the role of Washington State Department of Agriculture in this response. Our response is to, or our role is to ensure the food supply chain remains resilient and to ensure that public health and safety are our top priority.
Very well done. And that's your elevator speech. When someone says, is there anything you'd like to add? You can pull that out in your back pocket and be able to use it at a moment's notice. Thank you, Amber. That was very well done. Next slide. At this moment, our presentation is over. And does anyone have any thoughts or feedback, things that potentially could work for them, things that maybe we could discuss here that maybe doesn't work for them? It's okay. It doesn't hurt my feelings. I think that's what's exciting about these kind of webinars or even classroom instruction. We both can learn from each other. Anyone have anything to say? How about you, Logan? I'm going to put you on the spot. Logan, do you have anything?
I think, I guess having a map for any critical message is of the most importance. And I think that we jump from one thing to the next because that's what we have to do. But taking a little bit more time out of your day to just jot one single thought down would go a long way.
Absolutely. I couldn't say it any better. Is anyone, I missed my opportunity to say, oh, Fafa in my elevator speech. Well, Amber, you have fool around and find out. You have another chance, another time when you have a reporter who's going to talk to you. Well, thank you so much for allowing me to present to you. And I look forward to future classes with the Past Fusion Academy. And I can't wait to possibly see you all in person at another seminar, another webinar, or another classroom instruction. Jessica, Amber, back to you. And thank you, Dawn.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you. This was wonderful. This was really, really, really good and informative. And I hope everybody has gotten some really good information out of this. So again, thank you. This was wonderful. And thank you, Amber, for getting this put together.